In light of the recent Jake Sanderson extension, which was an extension that sparked a lot of conversation on Twitter, or X, sorry, I don't think I'm ever going to get used to that, but I figured now after the Sanderson extension, it would be the perfect time for another episode of NHL Overpaid or Underpaid. If you're new to the channel and you've never seen one of these before, it's a pretty simple concept. It's basically just like the NHL Over or Under series that I did earlier in the week. I made a post on the community tab asking you guys to name some players in the comments, and I picked out a bunch, and I'm going to go over them in this video and give you guys my thoughts on if I think those players are overpaid or underpaid. And I try my best to keep things fresh by picking players that were never featured in an episode of this before, and guys that, recently signed extensions within the past year or two. If this is your first time checking out the channel and you want NHL content just like this all year round, hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 75,000. If you're an NHL fan, this is the place to be. And with all that being said, let's go ahead and get this episode started, and we might as well start off with the Jake Sanderson extension. This comment came from a Blightful Canadian. Overpaid or underpaid, Jake Sanderson. So for those of you who don't know, yesterday the Ottawa Senators signed Jake Sanderson to an 8-year extension with an AAV of $8.05 million for a total of $64.4 million, which is pretty crazy considering Jake Sanderson is coming off of his rookie season. He's played a total of just 77 NHL games, and Sanderson was really good for the Senators in his rookie year, but this is something that we really don't see happen. We see players sign massive contracts like this after their ELC is up, but Sanderson still has 1 year left on his entry-level contract. This extension is not going to kick in until the start of the 2024-25 season. And of course, this is one of those contracts where the Senators are paying Jake Sanderson for what he's expected to do and what he's expected to become as a player, and not for what he has done. Is that a lot of money to give somebody coming off of their rookie season? Yes, but I don't think it's an overpay. Once again, this contract isn't going to kick in until the start of the 2024-25 season, and I could see a scenario where Jake Sanderson pops off this season as a sophomore and is easily worth, $8 million heading into his third NHL season. Sanderson is the real deal. This is a guy who's going to be a bona fide top pairing defenseman for a very, very long time. The Senators now lock him up for what will likely be all of the best years of Sanderson's career for his entire prime. You also have to factor in halfway through this Sanderson contract, the salary cap is going to be a lot higher than what it is now, and the Senators now have what I would call their core four locked up for a very long time in Tim Stützle, Jake Sanderson, Thomas Chabot, and Brady Tkachuk, which is a good thing. The next comment we have comes from Jazz Gaming, who says Pierre-Luc Dubois $8.5 million. I personally think it's a little over what he should be making, considering he's never been the most defensive guy or someone who's ever gotten over 63 points. And also really appreciate the kind words. I'm glad you enjoyed the channel. So I'm definitely right there with you on this one for all the reasons you mentioned. I think that was a lot of money to give to Pierre-Luc Dubois over the next 8 seasons for a guy who, like you mentioned, only has a career high of 63 points and isn't, the greatest 200-foot centerman. I think it's safe to assume that the Los Angeles Kings are really banking on Pierre-Luc Dubois taking another step, and he is only 25. We talked about Pierre-Luc Dubois in yesterday's video, actually, of players who have the most to prove this season. I think he has a ton to prove. This is a guy that's now on his third NHL team, and his tenures with his previous 2 teams in Columbus and Winnipeg ended pretty poorly. Pierre-Luc Dubois' effort levels and his work ethic have been put into question more than once throughout his career so far. I'm definitely going to say heading into this season, I think Pierre-Luc Dubois is overpaid at $8.5 million. If he doesn't have a career year in his first season with Los Angeles, I think it's going to be looked at as a pretty big disappointment. Moving along now to the next comment. This one comes from Baseball, who says Matthew Tkachuk at $9.5 million. I think it's a little under, but it'll be interesting to hear your thoughts, and also really appreciate the kind words. Glad you like the videos. I'm definitely going to go with underpaid for Matthew Tkachuk. I don't think anybody would have a problem if this guy was making $10.5 to $11 million per season. Matthew Tkachuk is right there in the conversation for the best winger in the league in terms of complete game. Not many players in the NHL do it better than Matthew Tkachuk. This guy puts up massive point totals, 109 points this past season, 104 the year prior, 24 points in 20 games for the Panthers in their run to the Stanley Cup Finals. He plays a very responsible 200-foot game, and of course is one of the league's biggest agitators, and you have to imagine one of the most annoying players to play against in the entire NHL. Does he cross the line sometimes? Yes, but he's a guy that can easily get away with it because of everything else he brings to the table and how productive he is. Moving along now to the next comment. This one comes from NeoXD, who says Bo Horvat at $8.5 million for the next 8 years. While he has put up solid numbers in the past, including 2 30-goal seasons, you could make the case that his numbers with the Canucks/Islanders shouldn't get him the big bucks like that. And also really appreciate the kind words. I'm definitely going to have to go with a little bit overpaid when it comes to Bo Horvat. Obviously, the fact that he was in the midst of having a career year really helped him land this kind of extension with the Islanders. 38 goals, 70 total points split between the Canucks and Islanders this past season. And you also have to factor in that Bo Horvat had pretty much all of the leverage in the contract negotiations with the New York Islanders. The Islanders traded for Horvat without an extension in place, and Bo Horvat was heading towards unrestricted free agency this summer. Lou Lamoriello and the Islanders pretty much had no choice but to overpay for Horvat a little bit and give him the kind of number he was looking for, or Horvat could have just walked and left in free agency, which would have been a complete disaster for the Islanders. The next comment we have comes from Nick Simon, who says, overpaid or underpaid, Dylan Cousins. As a Sabres fan, I view this as very even, as I think Cousins will explode into a point per game player as well as a solid two-way center, and also appreciate the kind words, glad you like the videos. So for those of you who don't know Cousins' contract, it actually kicks in this season, and it's a 7-year deal that will pay him $7.1 million per season, which I believe is a fantastic contract for the Buffalo Sabres. Dylan Cousins is coming off of a season in which he scored 31 goals and put up 68 points in 81 games, and just that production alone I think is close to or worth $7.1 million a season. And usually when it comes to young players, former high draft picks like Dylan Cousins, he was a former 7th overall pick, he's only 22, usually you get paid for what you're expected to do, not what you've already done. I believe this is a contract that's going to be looked at as a steal very soon, if it's not already. Dylan Cousins is a beast. He's going to continue to get better. He's a versatile player, can play center or the wing. Just so much potential in his game. Having a player like that locked up for the next 7 years at $7.1 million, that's a great deal for Buffalo. This next comment comes from Braden Sensation, who says, Brandon Hagel overpaid or underpaid at 6.5. Just recorded a 30-goal season and a career high in points, but will he stay consistent with the likes of Killorn leaving? Will he fill the top pairing line? So Hagel signed this extension earlier this summer. It is a 8-year deal worth $52 million total, an AAV of $6.5 million, and it actually doesn't kick in until the start of the 2024-25 season. Hagel still has 1 year left at a cap of $1.5 million, which is insane, but we're just talking about the extension here, and I think it's a great extension. I would say that's very fair for Brandon Hagel, if not maybe even a little bit underpaid. Like he mentioned, this is a guy who's coming off of a career year, 30 goals, 64 points in 81 games. Brandon Hagel really is the ideal complementary player for the likes of, Nikita Kucherov, Braden Point, Steven Stamkos. Hagel's got the finishing ability, has fantastic speed, he's a great forechecker, he's a high motor guy, he can kill penalties, just extremely versatile. Brandon Hagel really is the kind of player that every single coach in the league would love to have on their team. Moving along now to the next comment. This one comes from Tom W, and it's another member of the Lightning. Eric Cernak, 8 years, $5.2 million per season. That is an extension that will kick in this season. And this is one of those contracts where if you're not somebody who watches the Tampa Bay Lightning a ton, you might think that Eric Cernak is overpaid because he's not necessarily the biggest name player, doesn't get a whole lot of recognition, just kind of flies under the radar. But for what he brings to the table for the Tampa Bay Lightning, I think this is pretty fair. That is in terms of the cap hit. I feel like the term was a little bit long, but Eric Cernak is an absolute rock on the blue line for the Bolts. This is a guy who plays big minutes. He's the perfect kind of partner for somebody like Victor Hedman. Cernak is fantastic defensively, obviously very physically imposing. This is a guy that plays a very heavy physical style of game. Maybe you'd like a little bit more offensive production from a defenseman making $5 million plus a season, but I don't really think the Tampa Bay Lightning need that from Cernak. They just need him to play his game, especially when you already have the likes of Hedman and Sergachev usually putting up solid point totals from the blue line. Moving along now to the next comment. This one comes from Kevin Wong, who says, overpaid or underpaid Dmitry Orlov. So as a UFA earlier this summer, Dmitry Orlov signed a 2-year deal with the Carolina Hurricanes at a cap of $7.75 million, and I'm definitely going to have to go with overpaid when it comes to Dmitry Orlov just based off the cap hit alone. I think he's probably overpaid by maybe $1.5 to $2 million, but that's the price you pay when you want to land big name defenders on the UFA market, especially on, short-term deals. If this was a 3 to 4 year deal, I'm sure that cap hit would have been a lot lower. I don't expect this contract to really ever be a hindrance to the Hurricanes because it is only 2 years, and I think Orlov's going to be a good fit in Carolina. He's a good puck-moving offensive defenseman, which fits the Carolina Hurricanes style of play, and with all the other stout defenders they have on the team, I'm sure they're going to be able to mask his defensive deficiencies quite easily. Moving along now to the next comment. This one comes from Jake, who says, Adrian Kempe of the LA Kings. As a Kings fan, this guy is underpaid, undervalued undervalued by the rest of the league. He's been my favorite player since his rookie season. Would love to know what you think. And also, really appreciate the kind words and thank you for sticking around. At 5.5 mil a season, Adrian Kempe is definitely underpaid. That is a fantastic deal for the Los Angeles Kings over the last couple of seasons. This past season especially, where he put up a career-high 41 goals, Adrian Kempe has developed into one of the most efficient goal scorers in the league. He's incredibly fast, scores a lot of goals off the rush, and plays a brand of hockey that's really fun to watch. I can definitely see why, as a Kings fan, he would be your favorite player. The next comment we have comes from Devin and a Fluffy, who says, overpaid or underpaid Dylan Larkin. So Dylan Larkin's extension will kick in this season that pays him 8.7 mil a year through 2030-31. I'm sure I'm going to get called biased by a lot of people on this one, but I think 8.7 mil for Dylan Larkin is extremely fair. This is a guy that's silenced a lot of doubters over the past 2 seasons. He's pretty much been a point per game player. Larkin's got an elite defensive game, is always tasked with shutting down the opposition's top line. He plays in pretty much every situation, just carries a massive workload for the Red Wings, and I think he's done a fantastic job, especially over the past 2 seasons. He's really came into his own, and just comparing this contract to other centermen who recently signed extensions similar to this Larkin one, guys we talked about in this video, like Pierre-Luc Dubois and like Bo Horvat, I would take Dylan Larkin over those guys for sure. The next comment we have comes from Mercury, who says, overpaid or underpaid Mackenzie Weegar. In my opinion, even though it's only been 1 season with Calgary, I've never believed he was a defenseman worth 5 mil plus. I'm definitely going to disagree with you on this one. I think Mackenzie Weegar is actually even a little bit underpaid at 6.25 mil. In my opinion, Mackenzie Weegar is one of the best two-way defensemen in the league. He plays an unreal defensive game. Not many do it better than Weegar. He plays big minutes. He's capable of carrying a defense pairing on his own. Sure, his point totals were down this past season in Calgary at just 31, but this is a guy who, his final 2 seasons in Calgary, 44 points in 80 games, 36 points in 54 games. Mackenzie Weegar is a beast. He is a legit top pairing defenseman, and at 6.25 mil, I think that's a great contract. And now finally, finishing out the episode with the last comment from Nicholas, who says, I know it doesn't kick in until next season, but Austin Matthews, overpaid or underpaid? I'm sure everybody that's watching this knows by now, but just in case there's a couple people who don't, earlier this offseason, actually only like a week or 2 ago, Austin Matthews signed a 4-year, $53 million extension with the Toronto Maple Leafs that will carry an annual cap hit of 13.25 mil. And there are quite a few people out there that believe this is an overpay for Austin Matthews. It probably doesn't help that he's coming off of a year in which he only scored a measly 40 goals and 85 points, which for Matthews standards is a little bit low, and that just speaks to how good of a player this guy is. He's capable of scoring 60 goals in a season, putting up 100 plus points, and he plays Selke level defense. At his best, Matthews, in my opinion, is a top 3 player in the league. I think 13.25, even though that makes him the highest paid player in the league, is more than fair for Austin Matthews. I actually really like the contract. I know there's a lot of people that are a little bit concerned about the term and saying Matthews is gone after those 4 years are up, but when you're paying somebody that much a season, do you really want to sign them to, an 8-year deal, and then you're paying 32, 33, 34-year-old Austin Matthews 13.25? I actually feel like the term is perfect, and hey, if the Maple Leafs don't accomplish anything throughout this contract, if they don't win a Stanley Cup, to put it frank, then it's probably time for a change anyways. So that is going to wrap up this episode of NHL Overpaid or Underpaid. As always, when it comes to these interactive videos, I want to give a huge thank you to every single one of you who took the time to leave a comment on the post, even the comments that don't get featured in the video. Just know I read every single one, and I really appreciate all of you guys. You guys make these videos so much fun for me to do. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please be sure to leave the video a like. That is the best way to show your support. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want NHL content just like this all year round, hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all soon.